I took the job because I needed the money, and because nobody else wanted it. The Delta Bridge toll booth sat at the far end of County Road 47, where the two-lane span crossed the Sorensen River into absolutely nothing. The state had automated most toll collection years ago. But this bridge required a physical presence overnight insurance purposes, the regional manager said during our 10-minute phone interview. Liability. Someone to reset the equipment when it jammed, to call maintenance if a vehicle broke down on the span, to keep an eye on things. $300 a night, cash, 6 nights a week. I could have my pick of nights off. No direct deposit, no W-2 until January. The manager, whose name was Jerry, would meet me the first night to hand over keys and walk me through procedures. I said yes before he finished explaining the pay schedule. My apartment in Milburn was 2 months overdue. The eviction notice had come on yellow paper taped to my door where my neighbors could see it. I'd been working dispatch for a medical transport company, but they'd restructured in May, and restructured meant 23 people gone in one afternoon. Unemployment covered groceries if I was careful. It didn't cover rent. So I drove out to the Delta Bridge on a Sunday night in September when the air still held summer heat, but the light fell differently, sharper, making the cottonwoods along the river look skeletal even with their leaves intact. The bridge itself was a utilitarian thing, built in the 60s, concrete and steel without ornament. 2 lanes, no sidewalks, with sodium vapor lights every 60 feet that came on at dusk and painted everything the color of old cheese. The toll booth sat on the near side, a small hexagonal structure of reinforced glass and steel, maybe 8 feet across. Just enough room for a stool, a desk surface that ran along 3 walls, and the equipment: computers, card readers, a radio base station, a small refrigerator, a microwave, a coffee maker that looked older than I was. Jerry was waiting in the gravel lot beside the booth when I arrived. He was maybe 60, with a gray beard trimmed close and wire-rimmed glasses that caught the last of the daylight. He wore a state windbreaker over a flannel shirt, jeans, work boots caked with dried mud. "You're Emily," he said. "I am." "Jerry." He shook my hand once firmly. "Thanks for coming out. Let's get you situated before dark." He unlocked the booth with a key from a ring that held at least 20 others. The door was heavy, steel core with a pneumatic closer that pulled it shut with a solid click. Inside, the air smelled like electrical equipment and old coffee and something else, something mineralish that might have been the river. "Computer logs every transaction," Jerry said, pointing to the nearest monitor. "You don't need to touch it unless it freezes. If it freezes, there's a blue button under the desk. Hold it for 5 seconds, wait 30 seconds, it'll reboot. Radio's channel 8. Dispatcher's name is Martin, works midnight to 6 from the regional office in Carpenter. You call him if there's an accident, if someone tries to run the booth, if you need maintenance. Otherwise, leave him alone." He opened the refrigerator. It was empty except for a box of baking soda and a single bottle of water. "Bring your own food. Drink whatever you want, but no alcohol. There's a bathroom in the equipment shed 30 yards that way." He pointed past the booth toward a small cinderblock structure I'd barely noticed. "Keep the key on you, don't lose it." He handed me a key ring. 5 keys total, each labeled with a small plastic tag. Booth, shed, bathroom, gate, generator. Gate? Access road that runs under the bridge on the south side. It's chained. Nobody should need it, but if maintenance comes, they might ask you to open it. You call Martin first to confirm. Generator? In the shed. If power goes out, you give it 90 seconds, then go start the generator. There's a checklist taped to the wall. Follow it exactly. I nodded. Jerry pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and set it on the desk. "This is the part you need to pay attention to." The paper was photocopied, slightly blurred with text in courier font. A numbered list. Delta Bridge overnight procedures. "Read it now," Jerry said. "Read it twice. I'll wait." I unfolded the paper and started reading. 1. Shift begins at 10 p.m. and ends at 6 a.m. Do not arrive before 9:45 p.m. Do not leave before 6 a.m., even if your replacement arrives early. 2. Lock the booth door as soon as you enter. Keep it locked until 6 a.m. unless you must exit for generator or bathroom. 3. Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., face the bridge. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., face the access road. 4. If a vehicle stops at the booth between midnight and 2:30 a.m., process the transaction as normal. If a vehicle stops at the booth between 2:30 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not look at the driver. Process the transaction without making eye contact. After 4 a.m., resume normal protocols. 5. If you hear knocking on the booth glass after midnight, check the camera monitor first. If you see a person, respond. If you see nothing on the monitor, do not respond. Do not unlock the door. Do not look toward the knocking. 6. If the radio calls you by name between midnight and 5 a.m., answer. If the radio calls you by a name that is not yours, do not respond. Wait 5 minutes. If the radio is silent for 5 minutes, you may resume normal operations. 7. The bathroom in the equipment shed is available at any time. The rest of the shed is off limits between midnight and 4 a.m. If you hear sounds from the shed during those hours, ignore them. 8. If you see someone standing on the bridge between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., note their position. If they remain in the same position for more than 10 minutes, call Martin. If they move closer to the booth, do not call Martin. Turn off the booth lights and wait. Do not turn the lights back on until they are gone. 9. Do not cross the bridge on foot at any time during your shift. Do not exit the south end of the booth. If something rolls or falls from the booth onto the south side, leave it until 6 a.m. 10. If the power goes out, wait 90 seconds. If power does not return, go to the generator. Take the flashlight from the top desk drawer. Walk directly to the shed. Do not use the flashlight until you are inside the shed. Start the generator according to the checklist. Return directly to the booth. 11. Between 3 a.m. and 3:20 a.m., count the sodium lights on the bridge. There should be 18. If you count a different number, count again. If the number is still different, make a note in the logbook. Do not call Martin unless the number is 21 or higher. 12. If you see a vehicle stopped on the bridge with its hazard lights on, call Martin immediately. Do not exit the booth to offer assistance. Do not approach the vehicle. If the vehicle remains stopped for more than 15 minutes, note the time and description in the logbook. 13. If the computer screen displays a transaction time of 3:33 a.m., do not process it. Press the blue reset button and wait for reboot. If the screen displays 3:33 a.m. again after reboot, unplug the computer and use the manual log for the remainder of your shift. 14. At 5:30 a.m., unlock the booth door. At 5:45 a.m., turn on all exterior lights. At 6 a.m., you may leave. I read it twice as instructed. Some of the rules made sense in a bureaucratic way: shifts and lockdown procedures, safety protocols. Some of them didn't make sense at all. Questions? Jerry asked. The one about facing the bridge versus the access road. Why does the direction matter? It matters. And the one about the lights on the bridge. There are 18 sodium vapor lights on the bridge span. If you count a different number, something is wrong with the lights. We need to know. But it says if the number is 21 or higher, that's the threshold for calling Martin immediately. Below that, we just log it. I looked at him. His expression was neutral, patient, but not particularly friendly. Jerry, some of these rules are specific, he said. They're specific because they need to be. People who don't follow them don't last. People who follow them do fine. Don't last? They quit. He took the paper from my hands, refolded it, handed it back. You want the job or not? $300 a night, 6 nights a week, $7,200 a month cash. I want it. Good. My number's on the back of that paper. You call me if something happens that isn't covered by the rules, but only if it's urgent. Martin's your first contact for everything else. I'll come by Friday night to check in. Bring your first week's pay. He moved toward the door. You start tonight. I'll wait in my truck until 10 to make sure you're settled. Tonight? Shift starts at 10 p.m. It's 9:48. He left. The door closed behind him with its hydraulic sigh, and the lock engaged automatically. I was alone in the booth. I sat on the stool and looked at the equipment. 2 monitors, one showing the camera feed from above the booth, aimed at the approach road, and one showing the toll transaction software. A keyboard, a credit card reader on a flexible arm, a small metal cash box locked with a combination I didn't have. The radio base station, silent, a green light indicating power, a desk lamp, a digital clock on the wall that read 9:51 p.m. I unfolded the rules again and read them a third time. At 9:57 p.m., I turned the stool to face the bridge. The bridge stretched out into darkness, lit at intervals by the sodium lights. The river below was invisible, but I could hear it, a steady low rush like distant traffic. The far side of the bridge ended at a wall of trees, thick and dark. County Road 47 continued beyond, but I couldn't see where it went. The first vehicle came at 10:14 p.m. A pickup truck, older model, green or gray in the sodium light. It stopped at the booth and the driver lowered his window. A man, maybe 40, wearing a seed company cap. $3, I said through the intercom. He fed a 5 into the card reader slot. The machine processed it, returned $2 in change through the dispenser. The barrier arm lifted. He drove on without speaking. I logged the transaction. The computer showed 10:14 p.m., $3 cash. The second vehicle came at 10:41 p.m., a sedan. A woman, mid-30s, paid with a credit card. She smiled. I smiled back. The barrier lifted. At 11 p.m., I made coffee using the ancient coffee maker and water from a gallon jug I'd brought. The coffee tasted burnt, but I drank it anyway. At 11:32 p.m., a semi came through hauling a covered load. The driver paid with a fleet card. He had to back up twice to get the card to read. I waited. The barrier lifted. He drove on. At midnight exactly, the radio crackled. Delta Booth, this is Martin. Radio check. I picked up the handset. This is Delta Booth. I read you. Good. Everything normal? Everything's normal. You read the procedures? I did. Follow them. Call if you need me. The radio went silent. I set the handset back in its cradle and checked the camera monitor. The approach road was empty. The bridge was empty. The sodium lights burned steady in their 18 positions. I turned the stool to keep facing the bridge. At 12:17 a.m., I heard footsteps. They came from behind me, from the direction of the equipment shed. Slow, deliberate footsteps on gravel. I started to turn, then remembered, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., face the bridge. I kept facing the bridge. The footsteps stopped. I waited. My coffee had gone cold. I set the cup down carefully, quietly, and watched the camera monitor with my peripheral vision. The camera showed the approach road. No one was there. The footsteps started again, closer now. They stopped directly behind the booth. I kept facing the bridge. My hands were shaking. I put them flat on the desk surface. A light tap on the glass behind me. 3 taps. Slow. If you hear knocking on the booth glass after midnight, check the camera monitor first. I looked at the monitor. The approach road was empty. If you see nothing on the monitor, do not respond. Do not unlock the door. Do not look toward the knocking. I faced the bridge. I counted the sodium lights. 18 lights evenly spaced, 60 feet apart, 18 lights. The tapping came again. 3 taps, then 3 more. A rhythm. I focused on the far end of the bridge where the road disappeared into the trees. I tried to slow my breathing. The tapping stopped. At 12:41 a.m., a car came through the booth. A compact silver, a young man who paid with a card and didn't look at me. At 1:08 a.m., I saw someone on the bridge. They were standing near the center between two sodium lights just at the edge of visibility. A figure, human-sized, facing the booth. They didn't move. I checked the time. 1:08 a.m. I wrote it in the logbook. 1:08 a.m. Figure on bridge, center span, stationary. If they remain in the same position for more than 10 minutes, call Martin. I watched the clock. 1:09 a.m. 1:10 a.m. The figure didn't move. At 1:11 a.m., a pickup truck came through. The driver, a woman in a work uniform, paid with cash. She drove onto the bridge. Her headlights swept across the figure as she passed. The figure didn't move. The truck continued across the bridge and disappeared into the trees. 1:12 a.m. 1:13 a.m. At 1:14 a.m., the figure was gone. I wrote in the logbook, 1:14 a.m. Figure departed. My hands were steadier now. I drank the cold coffee. It tasted like metal. At 1:43 a.m., the radio crackled. Delta Booth, this is Martin, status check. This is Delta Booth, all clear. Any issues? I hesitated. Figure on bridge was in the logbook, but it had been gone before the 10-minute mark. No issues. Good. Stay sharp. The radio went silent. At 2 a.m., I turned the stool to face the access road. The access road ran north from the booth, parallel to the river, and disappeared into darkness after about 100 yards. There were no lights. The camera showed nothing but gravel and the faint shapes of trees. At 2:11 a.m., a sedan came through. I processed the transaction without looking at the driver as instructed. Credit card, barrier lifted, vehicle proceeded. At 2:34 a.m., a vehicle stopped at the booth. An SUV, dark-colored, windows tinted, the driver's window lowered. If a vehicle stops at the booth between 2:30 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not look at the driver. I kept my eyes on the keyboard. $3. A hand extended from the window. It held a credit card. The hand was normal as far as I could tell without looking directly. I took the card, processed the transaction, returned the card. The barrier lifted. The vehicle didn't move. I waited, still not looking. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. The driver's window closed. The vehicle drove on. I exhaled. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights on the bridge. I counted slowly, starting from the near end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 lights. I wrote in the logbook 3 a.m. Light count, 18. At 3:14 a.m., I heard sounds from the equipment shed. Metallic sounds like tools being moved. Then a scraping, something heavy being dragged across concrete. If you hear sounds from the shed during those hours, ignore them. I faced the access road. I didn't look toward the shed. The sounds continued for approximately 4 minutes, then stopped. At 3:41 a.m., a car came through the booth. I looked at the driver after 4 a.m. Normal protocols resumed. But it was 3:41 a.m. I kept my eyes down. Credit card, processed, barrier lifted. At 4 a.m., I turned the stool to face the bridge again. At 4:36 a.m., the radio crackled. Emily, are you there? I picked up the handset. This is Delta Booth. Emily, it's Martin. I need you to check something for me. If the radio calls you by name between midnight and 5 a.m., answer. What do you need? Can you see the bridge from where you are? Yes. Do you see any vehicles stopped on the bridge? I looked. The bridge was empty. No vehicles. Good. I had a call from State Patrol about a possible disabled vehicle in your area. Must have been a different bridge. Thanks. No problem. The radio went silent. At 5:30 a.m., I unlocked the booth door as instructed. At 5:45 a.m., I turned on all exterior lights. The booth had 4 floodlights mounted on the roof. I hadn't noticed the switch before, but it was labeled clearly. The floods came on bright and white, drowning out the sodium vapor lights and illuminating the approach road, the bridge entrance, the equipment shed. The shed looked normal. Cinder block, flat roof, 1 door, no windows. The gravel around it was undisturbed. At 6 a.m., a truck pulled into the lot. A man got out, mid-50s, wearing the same state windbreaker as Jerry. He unlocked the booth and stepped inside. "You're Emily?" "Yes." "I'm Ron. Day shift. How was the night?" "Quiet." "Good. Leave the logbook. I'll radio if there are any questions." I gathered my things, the gallon jug, the empty coffee cup, my jacket. I left the folded rules on the desk. Ron was already sitting on the stool checking the monitors. I drove home as the sun came up over the flat fields east of the river. My hands were sore from gripping the steering wheel. I realized I'd been clenching it for the entire drive. I slept until 2 p.m., woke up, ate cereal standing at my kitchen counter, and tried to decide if I'd imagined the footsteps. I hadn't imagined them. At 9:47 p.m., I drove back to the Delta Bridge and started my second shift. The second night was quieter. Ron handed me the logbook, nodded, and left. I locked the door at 10 p.m. and settled onto the stool. The routine was already becoming familiar. Face the bridge, process transactions, watch the monitors, listen. At 11:32 p.m., I heard a vehicle approach. A van, white, commercial. The driver paid with a fleet card. The transaction took 45 seconds. The barrier lifted. At midnight, Martin called for a radio check. I confirmed all clear. At 12:53 a.m., I heard footsteps again. They started near the shed, slow and even, moving across the gravel toward the booth. I kept facing the bridge. The footsteps circled the booth, always staying behind me, just out of sight. They made one complete circuit, then stopped. I waited. No tapping this time. After 2 minutes, the footsteps resumed, moving away from the booth back toward the shed. At 1:37 a.m., a figure appeared on the bridge. Same position as the previous night, center span, stationary. I noted the time in the logbook. I watched the clock, 1:38, 1:39, 1:40. At 1:47, a car came through the booth and drove across the bridge. Its headlights swept over the figure. The figure didn't move. At 1:48, the figure turned and walked toward the far end of the bridge, disappearing into the trees. I wrote, 1:48 a.m. Figure departed south into tree line. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 2:41 a.m., a truck stopped at the booth. I kept my eyes on the keyboard, processed the transaction without looking at the driver. The truck sat there for nearly 30 seconds after the barrier lifted, engine idling. Then it drove on. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights, 18 lights. I logged it. At 3:26 a.m., I heard sounds from the shed, footsteps inside, deliberate pacing, then silence. At 4 a.m., I turned to face the bridge again. The rest of the shift was unremarkable. 2 vehicles between 4 and 5 a.m., both paying with cards, both drivers bleary-eyed and silent. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. I handed him the logbook and left. On the third night, I brought a thermos of better coffee and a sandwich. The night followed the same pattern. Footsteps circling the booth after midnight, a figure on the bridge around 1:30 a.m. Sounds from the shed after 3 a.m. I processed 14 transactions total. The rules held. Nothing went wrong. On the fourth night, the pattern broke. At 2:53 a.m., facing the access road, I saw headlights. They were distant, maybe 200 yards up the access road, coming toward the booth. The camera showed a vehicle moving slowly, very slowly, as if the driver were searching for something. The vehicle stopped approximately 80 yards from the booth. The headlights stayed on. I could see it was a sedan, dark-colored. The driver's door opened. A man got out. He stood beside the car, looking toward the booth. I checked the rules. There was nothing about vehicles on the access road. Rule 3 said to face the access road between 2 and 6 a.m. That was all. The man started walking toward the booth. I picked up the radio handset. "Martin, this is Delta booth." "Go ahead, Delta." "I have a vehicle stopped on the access road, approximately 80 yards north of the booth. Driver is approaching on foot. Can you see the vehicle's lights?" "Yes." "How many headlights?" The question seemed strange, but I answered. "2. Are they steady or flickering?" "Steady." "Wait." The radio went silent. The man continued walking. He was maybe 50 yards away now, visible in the faint glow from the booth's exterior lights. He wore dark clothes, jeans, and a jacket. His pace was steady, unhurried. The radio crackled. "Delta, this is Martin. Do not exit the booth. Do not unlock the door. The access road is closed after midnight." "Copy." The man was 30 yards away now. I could see his face, middle-aged, clean-shaven, expressionless. "Martin, he's still approaching. Do not engage. If he reaches the booth, do not respond to knocking." "Copy." The man stopped 10 yards from the booth. He stood there, hands at his sides, looking directly at me through the glass. His expression didn't change. I faced the access road. I kept my eyes on the camera monitor. The monitor showed the man standing motionless. He stood there for 6 minutes. I timed it. Then he turned and walked back to his vehicle. The door closed. The headlights went dark. The camera showed nothing. I kept watching the monitor. After 3 minutes, the headlights came on again. The vehicle backed up slowly, turned, and drove away up the access road. I wrote in the logbook. 2:53 a.m. Vehicle on access road. Driver approached booth, departed 3:04 a.m. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights on the bridge. 18 lights. At 3:33 a.m., a vehicle came through the booth. I processed the transaction. The computer screen showed the time as 3:33 a.m. If the computer screen displays a transaction time of 3:33 a.m., do not process it. But I had already processed it. The barrier had already lifted. The vehicle, a small sedan, was already driving onto the bridge. I waited for something to happen. The vehicle crossed the bridge normally and disappeared into the trees. The computer logged the transaction. The time advanced to 3:34 a.m. I wrote in the logbook, 3:33 a.m. Transaction processed before time noted. No issues observed. At 4 a.m., I turned to face the bridge. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. I gave him the logbook. "Busy night," he said, reading my notes. "The vehicle on the access road, does that happen often?" "Sometimes." He didn't look up from the logbook. "You did right. Never open the door for anyone on the access road." "Martin said it's closed after midnight." "It is." "Then why would someone be there?" Ron set the logbook down and looked at me. "People take wrong turns. People get confused, doesn't matter why. You did right." I left. On Friday night, Jerry came by at 9:50 p.m. with an envelope of cash, $1,800 in 20s and 50s. "Any problems?" he asked. "No problems." "You're following the procedures?" "Yes." He nodded. "Good. Keep it up. I'll see you next Friday." He left. I counted the money twice, put it in my jacket pocket, and started my shift. The second week brought changes. On Monday night at 1:41 a.m., I counted the lights on the bridge during the required 3 a.m. count. I'd started checking earlier out of habit, 18 lights. But when I counted again at exactly 3 a.m., I counted 19. I counted a third time. 19 lights. I studied the bridge. The extra light was near the center span between positions 9 and 10. It didn't look like the sodium vapor lights. It was whiter, brighter, and it swayed slightly. I wrote in the logbook, 3 a.m. Light count 19. Extra light observed center span. The rules said to note counts other than 18 but not to call Martin unless the number was 21 or higher. I didn't call. At 3:14 a.m. I counted again. 18 lights. The extra light was gone. On Tuesday night at 2:38 a.m. a vehicle stopped at the booth during the no eye contact window. I kept my eyes down, processed the credit card transaction. The barrier lifted. The vehicle didn't move. I waited. 30 seconds. 45 seconds. The driver spoke. Which way to Carpenter? Do not look at the driver. I kept my eyes on the keyboard. Continue across the bridge, follow County Road 47 for 11 miles. Thank you. The vehicle drove on. At 3 a.m. I counted the lights. 18. On Wednesday night at 12:34 a.m., the radio crackled. Sarah, are you there? My name is Emily. Sarah is not my name. If the radio calls you by a name that is not yours, do not respond. Wait 5 minutes. I didn't pick up the handset. I watched the clock. 12:35, 12:36. Sarah, I need you to check the generator. I kept watching the clock. 12:37. Sarah, please respond. 12:38, 12:39, 12:40. The radio was silent. I waited. 12:41, 12:42. 12:43, 12:44. At 12:45 a.m. the radio crackled again. Delta Booth, this is Martin, radio check. I picked up the handset. This is Delta Booth, I read you. Everything normal? Everything's normal. Good. Call if you need me. The radio went silent. I wrote in the logbook, 12:34 a.m. Radio called wrong name. Followed protocol. No response. On Thursday night, the power went out. It happened at 1:17 a.m. The lights in the booth cut out. The monitors went dark. The hum of the equipment died. Outside, the sodium lights on the bridge stayed lit. They were on a different circuit, but everything else was black. If the power goes out, wait 90 seconds. I sat in the dark and counted seconds. The bridge was visible only as a series of yellow pools under the sodium lights. The river made its steady rushing sound. I couldn't see the equipment shed. 90 seconds. The power didn't return. Go to the generator, take the flashlight from the top desk drawer. Walk directly to the shed. Do not use the flashlight until you are inside the shed. I opened the top drawer and found the flashlight. Heavy, metal, with a square battery housing. I unlocked the booth door and stepped out. The night air was cold. The gravel crunched under my feet. I walked toward the shed, counting my steps. 23 steps. The shed door was locked. I used the key, opened the door, stepped inside. The interior was completely dark. I closed the door and turned on the flashlight. The generator sat against the far wall, a large red unit with a pull-start cord. The checklist was taped to the wall beside it, exactly as Jerry had said. Generator start, procedure 1, check fuel gauge. Needle must be above red line. 2, turn fuel valve to on position. 3, pull choke lever to closed position. 4, pull starter cord firmly, repeat if necessary. 5, once engine starts, push choke lever to open position. 6, wait 30 seconds, check voltmeter. Needle should be in green zone. 7, exit shed. Return to booth immediately. I followed the checklist. Fuel gauge was fine, valve to on, choke to closed. I pulled the starter cord. The engine coughed but didn't catch. I pulled again. The engine started loud in the small space. I pushed the choke to open. The voltmeter climbed into the green zone. I turned off the flashlight, opened the shed door, and stepped out. Something was standing beside the booth. I couldn't see it clearly in the darkness, just a shape, taller than me, perfectly still. It was between me and the booth door. Walked directly to the shed. Returned directly to the booth. I walked toward the booth. The shape didn't move. As I got closer, I could see it was a person or something person-shaped. It wore dark clothes. It had no face, just a smooth oval where the face should be. I kept walking. The shape was 5 feet away, 4 feet, 3 feet. I reached the booth door. I pulled it open. I stepped inside and locked it. The shape was gone. I checked the camera monitor. The power was back. The monitor was working. The approach road was empty. The shed was 30 yards away, door closed. I sat on the stool. My hands were shaking. I wrote in the logbook, 1:21 a.m. Power outage. Generator started per protocol. No issues. I didn't write about the shape. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. On Friday night, Jerry came at 9:50 p.m. with another envelope. He asked if there had been any problems. I said no. He nodded and left. I locked the booth and started my shift. At 2:43 a.m., during the no eye contact window, a vehicle stopped at the booth, an old pickup truck. The driver's window lowered. I kept my eyes on the keyboard. $3. A hand extended from the window holding cash, $3 bills. I took them, fed them into the register, gave no change. The barrier lifted. The truck didn't move. I waited. Miss, do not look at the driver. Yes? My son is on the bridge. I need to get him. The barrier is up. You can proceed. He's standing out there. He won't answer me. I need to go get him. I kept my eyes on the keyboard. Please proceed. Can you see him? Can you see my son? I glanced at the bridge. A figure was standing near the center span between 2 sodium lights, same position as other nights. The figure was stationary, facing the booth. Sir, please proceed across the bridge. If your son needs assistance, call 911. He's right there. I can see him. The truck sat there, engine idling. 30 seconds, 45. Sir, you need to move your vehicle. He's just standing there. 60 seconds. The radio crackled. Delta booth, this is Martin. Do you need assistance? I picked up the handset. There's a vehicle at the booth refusing to proceed. What's the issue? The driver reports seeing someone on the bridge. Tell the driver to proceed or leave. Do not exit the booth. Copy. I set the handset down. Sir, you need to proceed across the bridge or reverse and leave the toll area. Those are your options. The truck sat there for another 10 seconds. Then it backed up, turned, and drove away, back toward Milburn. The barrier lowered. I looked at the bridge. The figure was gone. I wrote in the logbook, 2:43 a.m. Vehicle refused to proceed. Driver reported seeing person on bridge. Vehicle departed, figure observed, departed 2:48 a.m. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. The 3rd week was when I found the amendment sheet. It was Tuesday, my 11th shift. Ron handed me the logbook as usual, but there was a second sheet of paper clipped to it. Delta Bridge overnight procedures. Amendments effective immediately. The following additions apply to overnight operations. 15. If a vehicle stops on the bridge with hazard lights on and does not move within 15 minutes, call Martin. Do not exit the booth. If the vehicle remains stopped for more than 30 minutes, make a second call. If the vehicle is gone before you make the second call, note the time it departed but do not call Martin. 16. If you see someone standing on the bridge during your shift, do not assume they are real. Apply the 10-minute rule from the original procedures. If they move toward the booth, follow original procedure, lights off, wait. If they wave or call out, do not respond. 17. Between 2:30 a.m. and 4 a.m., if a driver speaks to you during a transaction, you may respond with directions or basic information. Do not respond to questions about other vehicles, other people, or anything you have seen during your shift. 18. If you hear voices from the equipment shed between midnight and 4 a.m., ignore them even if they sound distressed. The shed is off limits during those hours for a reason. 19. If the access road gate is open when you arrive for your shift, Do not enter the booth. Call Jerry immediately and wait in your vehicle until he arrives or instructs you otherwise. 20. The bathroom in the equipment shed is available at any time, but you must announce yourself before entering. Say, coming in loudly before unlocking the bathroom door. Wait 3 seconds. Then enter. I read the amendments twice. Ron was already in his truck, ready to leave. "Ron," I called. He rolled down his window. "Yeah? These amendments, when were they added?" "This morning." Jerry dropped them off. "Why now?" He shrugged. "Things change. You follow the rules, you're fine." He drove away. I locked the booth and started my shift. The amendments were clipped to the wall beside the original procedures. At midnight, Martin called for a radio check. I confirmed all clear. At 12:41 a.m., I needed to use the bathroom. I unlocked the booth, walked to the shed, and stood outside the bathroom door. "Coming in," I said loudly. I waited 3 seconds. I unlocked the door and entered. The bathroom was small, clean, functional, a toilet, a sink, a mirror. I used it quickly and left. At 1:33 a.m., a figure appeared on the bridge. I noted the time. The figure stood in the same position, center span, facing the booth. At 1:42 a.m., it turned and walked toward the far end of the bridge, disappearing into the trees. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 2:57 a.m., I heard voices from the shed. 2 voices, maybe 3, speaking quickly, urgently. I couldn't make out the words. The voices overlapped, rose and fell. One voice sounded frightened. "If you hear voices from the equipment shed between midnight and 4 a.m., ignore them even if they sound distressed." I faced the access road. I didn't look toward the shed. The voices continued for approximately 6 minutes, then stopped abruptly. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. At 3:41 a.m., I heard footsteps circling the booth. They made 2 complete circuits, then stopped at the door behind me. I didn't turn around. After 30 seconds, the footsteps moved away. At 4 a.m., I turned to face the bridge. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. I gave him the logbook and the amended procedures. "Anything happen with the new rules?" he asked. "Just followed them." "Good." I drove home. The sun was coming up. I felt more tired than usual. On Wednesday night, something changed on the bridge. At 1:28 a.m., a figure appeared. I noted the time. But this figure was different. It wasn't standing still. It was walking slowly across the bridge from the far end, moving toward the booth. I checked the rules. If they move toward the booth, turn off the booth lights and wait. Do not turn the lights back on until they are gone. The figure was approximately 200 yards away, moving steadily. I reached for the light switch. The radio crackled. "Delta Booth, this is Martin." I picked up the handset. "This is Delta Booth. I'm showing a possible issue on the bridge camera. Can you confirm you see someone approaching?" "Confirmed. Approximately 200 yards, moving toward the booth. Turn off your lights now. Wait until I give the all clear." "Copy." I turned off the booth lights. The interior went dark except for the glow of the monitors. Outside, the sodium lights on the bridge stayed lit. The figure continued walking, visible under each light as it passed. 150 yards, 100 yards. I kept watching. The figure walked with an even pace, arms at its sides. It wore dark clothing. I couldn't see its face. 75 yards, 50 yards. The radio crackled. "Do not make any sound. Do not move." I sat perfectly still. The figure reached the near end of the bridge, 20 yards from the booth. It stopped. It stood there, facing the booth. It raised one arm and pointed directly at me. I couldn't see its face. The sodium light behind it created a silhouette, featureless and black. The figure lowered its arm. It turned and walked back onto the bridge, moving at the same even pace. 50 yards, 75 yards, 100 yards. At 150 yards, it stopped. It stood there for 10 seconds. Then it walked to the edge of the bridge, stepped over the railing, and dropped into the river. I heard the splash, faint, distant. The radio crackled. "Turn on your lights. Make a note in the logbook. Time and description." I turned on the booth lights. I picked up the handset. "Martin, did you see it go into the river?" "I saw. Make the note. Continue your shift." "Is someone going to, make the note. Continue your shift." The radio went silent. I wrote in the logbook, 1:28 a.m. Figure on bridge. Approached booth. Lights off per protocol. Figure departed into river 1:34 a.m. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. On Thursday night, I arrived at 9:51 p.m. and found the access road gate open. The gate was a heavy steel frame on a chain, pulled across the access road about 60 yards north of the booth. It was supposed to be closed and locked. Now it hung open, the chain lying on the ground. If the access road gate is open when you arrive for your shift, do not enter the booth. Call Jerry immediately and wait in your vehicle until he arrives or instructs you otherwise. I stayed in my car and dialed Jerry's number from the back of the original procedure sheet. He answered on the second ring. "This is Jerry." "Jerry, it's Emily. I'm at the bridge. The access road gate is open." Silence for 3 seconds. "Are you in your vehicle?" "Yes." "Stay there. Lock your doors. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up. I locked the doors and waited. The booth sat dark and empty. The bridge stretched into darkness, lit by its 18 sodium lights. The access road disappeared into trees beyond the open gate. At 10:03 p.m., headlights appeared on the access road from the north, moving fast. Jerry's truck. He stopped at the gate, got out, and examined the chain. He picked it up, wrapped it around the gate frame, and locked it with a heavy padlock. Then he walked to my car. I rolled down the window. "You did right," he said. "Don't mention this to Ron, I'll handle it." "What happened?" "Sometimes the lock fails. Corrosion, I'll replace it." He looked at the booth, then back at me. "It's 10:08. You can start your shift. Everything else is normal." "Jerry, what would have happened if I'd gone into the booth with the gate open?" He looked at me for a long moment. "You didn't. That's what matters." He walked to his truck and drove away. I waited until his taillights disappeared, then got out of my car and walked to the booth. I unlocked it, locked the door behind me, and sat on the stool. Ron had left the logbook on the desk as usual. I flipped back through the pages, reading previous entries. Most were routine: transaction counts, light counts, weather notes. But there were others. September 14th. Figure on bridge 1:22 a.m., departed 1:31 a.m. September 9th, vehicle on access road. 2:47 a.m., driver approached booth, departed 2:55 a.m. September 3rd, light count 19th August 28th, power outage 3:14 a.m., generator started August 27th, radio called wrong name 1:08 a.m. The entries went back months. Different handwriting, different people working this shift. The same events over and over. At midnight, Martin called for a radio check. I confirmed all clear. At 1:36 a.m., a figure appeared on the bridge. I noted the time. It stood motionless for 8 minutes, then departed. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 2:51 a.m., during the no eye contact window, a vehicle stopped at the booth. I processed the transaction without looking up. Credit card. Barrier lifted. The vehicle sat there. Engine idling. "Miss?" "Yes." "Is this the road to Carpenter?" You may respond with directions or basic information. "Yes. Continue across the bridge, follow County Road 47 for 11 miles. "Have you seen a blue pickup truck come through tonight?" My brother was supposed to meet me an hour ago. Do not respond to questions about other vehicles, other people, or anything you have seen during your shift. I kept my eyes on the keyboard. "I can't help with that. Please proceed." The vehicle sat there for another 10 seconds, then drove on. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. At 3:37 a.m., I heard footsteps inside the shed. They paced back and forth, then voices, two of them, speaking rapidly. I couldn't make out the words. The voices rose urgent, almost shouting, then silence. I faced the access road. I didn't look toward the shed. At 4 a.m., I turned to face the bridge. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. I handed him the logbook. "How was the night?" he asked. "Normal," I said. He nodded and sat down on the stool. I left. On Friday night, Jerry brought my third week's pay, $2,700. He handed me the envelope and asked if there had been any problems. "The gate was open last night," I said. "I know, I fixed it. Anything else?" "No." "Good." He paused. "You're doing well, Emily. Most people don't make it past 2 weeks. Why not? They don't follow the rules, or they follow them but can't handle the—" He paused. "The unusual aspects of the job. The figures on the bridge. Among other things." He looked at me. "You handle it well. You stay calm. That matters." "What are they, Jerry?" "I don't know. Neither does anyone else who's worked here. We know the rules keep you safe. That's enough." He left. I started my shift. The fourth week brought a storm. It started on Tuesday night around 11 p.m. Rain at first, steady and cold. Then wind, strong enough to rock the booth slightly. The sodium lights swayed on their poles. The river rose, visible now in the amber light. Churning fast and dark. At midnight, Martin called. "Delta booth, we're tracking the storm. It's going to get worse. You have the emergency procedures?" "No." "Check the desk. Bottom drawer on the right." I opened the drawer. Inside was a single sheet of paper laminated titled Emergency Protocols, Severe Weather. "Got it," I told Martin. "Read it now. I'll stay on the line." I read quickly. Emergency Protocols, Severe Weather. If severe weather occurs during your shift, high winds, flooding, lightning, ice. 21. Stay in the booth. Do not exit for any reason except generator failure or if the booth structure is compromised. 22. If lightning is visible, unplug the computer and radio. Continue logging transactions manually. Rely on the camera monitor for vehicle identification. 23. If the bridge floods and is no longer passable, lower the barrier and place the red warning cones located under the desk at the booth entrance. Call Martin immediately. 24. If winds exceed sustained 40 miles per hour, booth shaking, debris flying, move to the floor behind the desk. Stay there until winds subside. 25. During severe weather, disregard rules regarding direction of facing. Prioritize your safety and monitor both bridge and access road as needed. Emily, you still there? I'm here. Weather Service says winds could hit 50 miles per hour by 2 a.m. You follow those protocols exactly. If the booth becomes unsafe, I'll tell you to evacuate to your vehicle. Don't leave otherwise. Understood. Call me at the first sign of structural problems, I mean it. I will. The radio went silent. At 12:43 a.m., the wind picked up. The booth shook. I could hear debris branches, gravel hitting the glass. The sodium lights swung wildly. One of them flickered but stayed lit. At 1:14 a.m., lightning flashed across the river. Thunder followed immediately, loud enough to rattle the windows. I unplugged the computer and the radio base station. A vehicle approached the booth, a sedan moving slowly through the rain. I processed the transaction manually, writing the time and amount in the logbook. The driver paid with cash, exact change. The barrier lifted. The vehicle proceeded onto the bridge. Halfway across, its brake lights flashed. The vehicle stopped. I watched through the rain-streaked glass. The vehicle sat motionless, hazard lights off, engine running. 15 seconds. 30 seconds. If a vehicle stops on the bridge with hazard lights on, call Martin immediately. The hazards weren't on. The rules didn't apply. I kept watching. The vehicle sat there for 2 minutes. Then it reversed slowly, backing up until it reached the near end of the bridge. It turned and drove away, back toward Milburn. I wrote in the logbook, 1:18 a.m. Vehicle stopped mid-bridge, no hazards, reversed and departed. At 1:33 a.m. the booth shook hard. Wind howled around the structure. I moved to the floor behind the desk and crouched there, listening to the storm. The wind was so loud I almost didn't hear the footsteps. They circled the booth, slow and deliberate, audible even over the wind. 3 circuits. They stopped at the door behind me. The door handle rattled. I stayed on the floor. The handle rattled again, harder. Then the footsteps moved away. At 2:07 a.m. the wind began to subside. I climbed back onto the stool. The rain was lighter now, a steady drizzle. The bridge was intact. The sodium lights still swung, but more gently. I plugged in the computer and radio. The radio crackled immediately. Delta Booth, this is Martin. Status. I'm here. Booth is intact. Bridge appears clear. Injuries? None. Good. Stay alert. Storm's passing, but there's debris. Call me if anything blocks the bridge. Copy. At 2:43 a.m., a vehicle stopped at the booth. No eye contact window. I processed the transaction without looking up. The barrier lifted. The vehicle drove on. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21 lights. I counted again. 21. If the number is 21 or higher, call Martin immediately. I picked up the radio handset. Martin, this is Delta Booth. Go ahead. Light count is 21. Silence for 3 seconds. You're certain? I've counted twice. 21 lights. Which positions are extra? I looked at the bridge. The extra lights were near the center span, clustered together. They were whiter than the sodium vapor lights, brighter, and they didn't sway. 3 extra lights, center span, between positions 9 and 12. Do not exit the booth. Do not look directly at the extra lights for more than a few seconds. I'm sending maintenance. Copy. I set the handset down and looked at the bridge. The 3 extra lights were perfectly still, burning bright and white. They looked like headlights, but they were too high off the road, too far apart. At 3:14 a.m., the lights went out. I counted again. 18 lights. I picked up the radio. Martin, extra lights are gone. Count is back to 18. Copy. Maintenance is still en route. They'll inspect at dawn. At 4 a.m., I turned to face the bridge as usual. At 4:36 a.m., headlights appeared on the access road from the south. A state truck, amber lights flashing. It stopped at the booth. A man in a reflective vest got out and knocked on the glass. I checked the camera monitor first. I saw him clearly. I unlocked the door. You're Emily? Yes. I'm Tom, maintenance. Martin sent me to check the bridge. You reported extra lights? Yes, 3 of them, center span. They disappeared at 3:14. Show me where, I pointed. Between positions 9 and 12. He nodded, wrote something on a clipboard, and walked toward the bridge. He stood at the entrance, shining a flashlight across the span. After 2 minutes, he walked back. I don't see anything structural. Probably a vehicle with unusual light placement stopped briefly. Rain and wind can create reflections. Those lights weren't reflections. He looked at me. You've been here almost a month, right? 4 weeks. Then you know things look strange at night, especially during weather. You did right to call it in. But there's nothing there now. He got back in his truck. I'll file the report. You stay safe. He drove away. I locked the booth and sat on the stool. The storm had passed. The bridge was empty. The lights numbered 18. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. Hell of a night, he said, looking at the logbook. Storm damage? Nothing serious. Good. He settled onto the stool. Get some rest. I drove home. The roads were littered with branches. The sun was coming up over flooded fields. On Wednesday night, the bridge was quiet. On Thursday night, I found a Second Amendment sheet clipped to the logbook. Delta Bridge overnight procedures. Additional amendments effective immediately. 26. If you count more than 20 lights on the bridge during the 3 a.m. count, follow protocol and call Martin. After calling, count again every 5 minutes until the count returns to 18. Do not exit the booth. Do not approach the extra lights. 27. If a vehicle stops mid-bridge during your shift and does not move for more than 5 minutes, call Martin immediately regardless of whether hazard lights are on. Do not exit the booth to offer assistance. 28. If you see a person standing in the river below the bridge at any time during your shift, do not call Martin. Note the time and position in the logbook. Do not watch them. Do not exit the booth. 29. Between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., if you hear voices calling your name from outside the booth, do not respond. Do not check the camera monitor. Wait until 6 a.m. 30. If the booth door unlocks itself during your shift, lock it again immediately. If it unlocks a second time, wedge the stool against it and call Martin. I read the new rules twice. Ron was waiting in his truck. Ron, why are there more amendments now? He rolled down his window. Things change. Patterns shift, we adjust. Shift how? You follow the rules, Emily, that's all you need to do. He drove away. I locked the booth and started my shift. At midnight, Martin called for a radio check. At 1:41 a.m., a figure appeared on the bridge. I noted the time. The figure stood motionless for 9 minutes, then walked toward the far end and disappeared. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 2:34 a.m., I heard the booth door rattle. The handle moved. The lock clicked. The door swung open 6 inches. If the booth door unlocks itself during your shift, lock it again immediately. I stood and pushed the door closed. I turned the deadbolt. I sat back down. At 2:41 a.m., the lock clicked again. The door swung open. If it unlocks a second time, wedge the stool against it and call Martin. I grabbed the stool and wedged it under the door handle. I picked up the radio handset. Martin, this is Delta Booth. Go ahead. The booth door has unlocked itself twice. Stool is wedged against it. Are you secure? Yes. Do not remove the stool. Do not exit the booth. I'm coming out. Copy. The radio went silent. I sat on the desk surface, feet off the floor, and watched the door. The stool held it closed. Outside, through the glass, I could see the bridge, the river, the access road. Everything was still. At 3:14 a.m., headlights appeared on the access road from the south. Martin's truck moving fast. He stopped at the booth, got out, and examined the door from outside. He knocked on the glass. Emily, it's Martin. I'm going to open the door. Don't move the stool. I heard him unlock the door from the outside. He pushed it open against the wedged stool, reached in and pulled the stool away. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Martin was in his 50s, thin, with gray hair and deep-set eyes. He wore a state jacket and carried a heavy flashlight. Show me the lock, he said. I pointed. He examined the deadbolt, tested it several times, then checked the door frame. After 2 minutes, he turned to me. Lock's fine. Frame's fine. This shouldn't happen. But it did. I know. He looked around the booth, checking the windows, the equipment, the monitors. Everything was normal. You did right to call. I'm going to check the perimeter. He left, taking the flashlight. Through the glass, I watched him circle the booth, shining the light at the ground, the walls, the equipment shed. After 5 minutes, he came back inside. Nothing out there, no tampering, no damage. He locked the door and tested it. It held. I'm going to stay until 4 a.m. Make sure it doesn't happen again. You don't have to. I do. He stood near the door, not speaking. I sat on the stool and turned to face the access road as required. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights on the bridge. 18. At 3:38 a.m., I heard voices from the shed. 2 voices rising and falling, urgent. Martin heard them too. He glanced at the shed, then back at me. "Ignore it," he said quietly. The voices continued for 4 minutes, then stopped. At 4 a.m., Martin unlocked the door. "You're clear now. Rules say you face the bridge after 4, so I'll leave. You call me if anything else happens." "What was trying to get in, Martin?" He looked at me for a long moment. "I don't know, but the rules keep you safe if you follow them. You're doing good, Emily. Keep it up." He left. I turned to face the bridge. The rest of the shift was quiet. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. I gave him the logbook. He read the entry about the door. "Martin came out?" "He did." "That's rare. Must have been serious." He said the lock was fine. "It probably is." Ron looked at the door, then at me. "But sometimes things happen here that don't make sense. You just keep following the rules." I drove home. The sun was bright and warm. I slept until 3 p.m. On Friday night, Jerry brought my 4th week's pay, $3,600. "Martin told me about the door," he said. "You handled it right." "What's happening here, Jerry?" "You're doing a job that pays well because it's difficult, that's all." "That's not all." He sighed. "Emily, I've managed this bridge for 11 years. I don't know what's out there. I don't know why the rules work. I just know they do. People who follow them are safe. People who don't." He stopped. "People who don't what?" "They quit. They leave. Sometimes they don't come back for their last paycheck." He handed me the envelope. "You're smart. You're careful. You're going to be fine." He left. I started my shift. The 5th week was quiet until Thursday. On Thursday night at 1:43 a.m., I saw someone in the river. They were standing in the water below the bridge, approximately 60 yards downstream. The sodium lights didn't reach that far, but I could see them in silhouette against the reflected light on the water. A person, chest deep, motionless. If you see a person standing in the river below the bridge at any time during your shift, do not call Martin. Note the time and position in the logbook. Do not watch them. I wrote in the logbook, 1:43 a.m. Person in river, 60 yards downstream, east side. I turned my attention back to the bridge. I didn't look at the river again. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 2:37 a.m., during the no eye contact window, a vehicle stopped at the booth. I processed the transaction without looking up. The driver spoke. "How deep is the river?" You may respond with directions or basic information. "I don't know the depth. I saw someone in the water downstream. Are they okay?" Do not respond to questions about other vehicles, other people, or anything you have seen during your shift. Please proceed. "But there's someone. Please proceed." The vehicle sat there for 10 seconds, then drove on. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. At 3:23 a.m., I heard footsteps circling the booth. They made 3 complete circuits, then stopped at the south-facing window. I heard breathing, close and deliberate, just on the other side of the glass. I kept facing the access road. The breathing continued for 2 minutes, then stopped. The footsteps moved away. At 4 a.m., I turned to face the bridge. At 4:57 a.m., I heard my name. "Emily!" The voice came from outside, from the direction of the equipment shed. A woman's voice, familiar. "Emily, can you hear me?" It was my mother's voice. Between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., if you hear voices calling your name from outside the booth, do not respond. Do not check the camera monitor. I sat perfectly still. "Emily, I need help, please." My mother lived in Oregon. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. She couldn't be here. "Emily Bretel, please open the door." I gripped the edge of the desk. The voice was perfect, exactly right. The slight rasp, the way she drew out the first syllable of my name. Emily, I'm hurt. I need you. I kept facing the bridge. I counted the sodium lights. 18 lights. Emily, why won't you help me? I counted the lights again. 18. The voice stopped. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. I handed him the logbook without speaking. You okay? He asked, reading the entries. I'm fine. Entry says you heard voices at 4:57. What did they say? Doesn't matter, I followed the protocol. He nodded. That's right, good work. I drove home. I didn't call my mother. I didn't want to know if something was actually wrong. On Friday night, Jerry brought my 5th week's pay. He also brought a small cardboard box. What's this? I asked. Supplies. Extra batteries for the flashlight. Fresh logbook. And this. He pulled out a small black device, rectangular with a clip. Personal alarm. 130 decibels. You clip it to your jacket. If you're ever outside the booth and something happens, you pull this pin, makes a hell of a noise. When would I use it? Hopefully never, but you keep it with you. He looked at me. You're at 5 weeks. That's longer than most people last. You're doing real good. How long do people usually work here? Varies. Shortest was 3 nights. Longest is Ron. He's been on days for 4 years. And nights? Nights turn over more. You're proving you can handle it, though. I took the alarm and clipped it to my jacket. Jerry left. I started my shift. At 12:37 a.m., the radio crackled. Emma, are you there? My name is Emily. Emma is close, but not correct. If the radio calls you by a name that is not yours, do not respond. Wait 5 minutes. I didn't pick up the handset. I watched the clock. Emma, I need you to check something for me. 12:38. Emma, the camera shows a vehicle on the bridge. Can you confirm? I looked at the bridge. It was empty. 12:39. Emma, respond, please. 12:40. Emma, this is urgent. 12:41, 12:42. The radio was silent. At 12:47, the radio crackled again. Delta Booth, this is Martin, radio check. I picked up the handset. This is Delta Booth, I read you. Everything normal? Everything's normal. Good. The radio went silent. At 1:33 a.m., a figure appeared on the bridge. It stood in the center span for 6 minutes, then walked toward the far end and disappeared. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. At 3:41 a.m., the computer screen flickered. The time displayed 3:33 a.m. If the computer screen displays a transaction time of 3:33 a.m., do not process it. Press the blue reset button and wait for reboot. No vehicle was at the booth. This was just the clock. I pressed the blue reset button and held it for 5 seconds. The screen went dark, then rebooted. The time now showed 3:42 a.m. At 4 a.m., I turned to face the bridge. At 5:34 a.m., just as the sky was beginning to lighten, I saw someone walking toward the booth from the bridge. A person moving slowly, steadily from the far end. They walked down the center of the roadway, hands at their sides. As they got closer, I could see it was a man, middle-aged, wearing dark clothes. He walked all the way to the near end of the bridge and stopped at the barrier. He looked at the booth. It was the man from the access road, the one who had approached the booth during my 4th shift. Same face, same clothes, same expressionless stare. He stood there for 30 seconds, then turned and walked back onto the bridge. He walked to the center span and stopped. He climbed over the railing. He dropped into the river. I heard the splash. I wrote in the logbook. 5:34 a.m. Man walked from south end of bridge, stopped at barrier, returned to center span, and entered river. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. He read the entry. You see this happen often? I asked. Often enough. He looked at me. You're learning there's a pattern here. Things repeat. You follow the rules, you're safe. That's the job. I drove home. The sun was fully up. The day was clear and cold. I had been working at the Delta Bridge for 5 weeks. I had $4,500 saved. My rent was almost current. I could quit. I could find another job, something normal, something that made sense. But I didn't quit. I came back Sunday night, and Monday night, and Tuesday night, on Wednesday night at 1:23 a.m. Something new happened. A vehicle stopped on the bridge, hazard lights flashing. If you see a vehicle stopped on the bridge with its hazard lights on, call Martin immediately. Do not exit the booth to offer assistance. I picked up the radio handset. Martin, this is Delta Booth. Vehicle stopped on bridge, center span, hazards on. Copy. Time, 1:23 a.m. Keep watching, I'll monitor from here. Call me if anyone exits the vehicle. Copy. I watched. The vehicle, a sedan, dark-colored, sat motionless with its hazards flashing. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. At 1:30 a.m., the driver's door opened. I picked up the handset. Martin, driver exiting vehicle. Copy, watch only. Do not exit. A person got out of the car. They walked to the front of the vehicle, stood there for a moment, then walked to the railing. They leaned over it, looking down at the river. At 1:32 a.m., they climbed over the railing. Martin, person entering river. Copy, stay in the booth. The person dropped. I heard the splash. The hazard lights continued flashing. The vehicle sat empty on the bridge. Martin, person is in the river. Vehicle still on bridge. Copy, I'm calling State Patrol. They'll handle removal. You continue your shift. Copy. At 1:47 a.m., State Patrol arrived. 2 cars, lights flashing. Officers got out and approached the vehicle. They opened the doors, checked the interior, spent several minutes looking over the railing at the river. After 20 minutes, a tow truck arrived. They loaded the vehicle and left. The patrol cars followed. I wrote in the logbook, 1:23 a.m. Vehicle stopped center span, hazards on. Driver entered river 1:32 a.m. State Patrol responded 1:47 a.m. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. He read the logbook entry. Did they find the person? I asked. State Patrol will search downstream at dawn. Usually they don't find anything. How often does this happen? Once, twice a month, sometimes more. He looked at me. You're doing good, Emily. You stay calm. That's important. I drove home. On Thursday night, I worked my shift without incident. No figures, no voices, no vehicles on the bridge, just routine transactions. On Friday night, Jerry came with my 6th week's pay. $5,400 total saved now. Any issues? He asked. Saw someone go into the river Wednesday night. Martin told me, you handled it right. He handed me the envelope. You're at 6 weeks, that's good, real good. How much longer do most people work here? That's up to you. Job's yours as long as you want it. What's the longest anyone's worked nights? He paused. There was a woman, Sarah, worked nights for almost 4 months. She left last April. Why did she leave? She didn't say, just stopped showing up. He looked at me. But you're different. You're steady. You're careful. I think you could go longer if you wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to go longer, but I needed the money, and I'd gotten used to the rhythm of the shifts. I started working 7 nights a week. The 7th week was routine. The 8th week was quiet. During the 9th week, I found a 3rd amendment sheet. Delta Bridge overnight procedures. Critical amendments effective immediately. 31. If the power goes out more than once during a single shift, do not start the generator the 2nd time. Call Martin immediately and wait for instructions. 32. If you see 3 or more figures on the bridge simultaneously, turn off the booth lights and call Martin. Do not watch the figures. Do not count them again. 33. If a vehicle enters the toll booth area in reverse, do not process the transaction. Lower the barrier and call Martin immediately. 34. Between midnight and 4 a.m. If the river sounds like voices, ignore it. Do not try to distinguish words. Do not exit the booth. 35. If you find a note or object left inside the booth that was not there at the start of your shift, do not touch it. Call Martin immediately. Describe the object but do not move it. I read the new rules and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. That night at 2:14 a.m., I heard the river. It did sound like voices, multiple voices overlapping, rising and falling. I couldn't make out words, but the cadence was human, conversational. If the river sounds like voices, ignore it. I faced the access road and processed 2 transactions. The voices continued until 2:37 a.m., then stopped. On my 58th shift, during the 10th week at 1:41 a.m., I saw 3 figures on the bridge. They appeared simultaneously, evenly spaced across the span. One near the entrance, one at the center, one at the far end, all facing the booth. If you see 3 or more figures on the bridge simultaneously, turn off the booth lights and call Martin. I turned off the lights and picked up the radio handset. Martin, this is Delta Booth, 3 figures on bridge, simultaneous appearance. Copy, lights off. Lights off. Do not watch them, I'm monitoring from here, I'll tell you when they're gone. I set the handset down and faced away from the bridge toward the interior wall of the booth. I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow. I tried to slow it. 3 minutes passed, 5 minutes. The radio crackled. Delta, figures are gone. Turn your lights back on. I turned on the lights and looked at the bridge. It was empty. Martin, confirmed, bridge is clear. Copy, continue your shift. I wrote in the logbook, 1:41 a.m. 3 figures on bridge, lights off per protocol. Figures departed 1:48 a.m. At 3 a.m. I counted the lights, 18. On my 63rd shift, I found something in the booth. I arrived at 9:52 p.m. Ron was waiting. He handed me the logbook and left without speaking, which was unusual. I locked the door and settled onto the stool. At 10:23 p.m., while processing a transaction, I noticed something on the desk surface near the radio. A small object, metallic, shaped like a key but with no teeth. It was old, tarnished, with a loop at one end. If you find a note or object left inside the booth that was not there at the start of your shift, do not touch it. Call Martin immediately. I picked up the radio handset. Martin, this is Delta Booth. Go ahead. There's an object on the desk. Small, metallic, key-shaped. It wasn't here when Ron left. Silence for 3 seconds. Don't touch it, I'm coming out. Copy. At 10:41 p.m., Martin arrived. He came into the booth and looked at the object without touching it. He pulled a plastic bag from his jacket, carefully picked up the object with the bag and sealed it. This happens sometimes, he said. Objects appear. We don't know how or why. What do you do with them? Document them, store them. Try to figure out what they are. He held up the bag. This looks like an old railway key. Delta Bridge was built in the 60s, but there was a railway bridge here before that. Washed out in the flood of 1938. You think it's from that bridge? Maybe, or maybe it's something else entirely. He put the bag in his pocket. You did right to call. Don't touch anything unusual. If it happens again, same protocol. He left. The rest of the shift was quiet. On my 70th shift at 3 a.m., I counted 22 lights. I called Martin immediately. Light count is 22. Where are the extra lights? 4 clustered near center span altogether. Do not exit the booth, I'm sending maintenance. Copy. I counted every 5 minutes as instructed. 3:05 a.m., 22 lights. 3:10 a.m., 22 lights. 3:15 a.m., 18 lights. I called Martin. Count returned to 18. Copy. Maintenance is still en route for inspection. At 3:47 a.m., a maintenance truck arrived. The technician inspected the bridge with a spotlight. After 10 minutes, he came to the booth. Found burn marks on the center span. Railings scorched in 4 places. No explanation. I'm filing a report. What causes that? Don't know. This bridge has anomalies. You're doing your job right. He left. I wrote in the logbook. 3 at a.m. Light count 22. Count returned to 18 at 3:15 a.m. Maintenance found scorch marks on railing. I had been working at the Delta Bridge for 11 weeks. I had over $10,000 saved. My rent was current. I had started paying down my credit cards. The job was sustainable, I told myself. The rules worked. I stayed safe. But I was changing. I noticed it in small ways. I couldn't sleep without checking that my apartment door was locked 3 times. I counted streetlights when I drove. I avoided looking at my reflection in windows after dark. On my 74th shift during my 12th week at 4:53 a.m., I heard my name again. Emily. My mother's voice from outside the booth, direction of the shed. Emily, please help. Between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., if you hear voices calling your name from outside the booth, do not respond, do not check the camera monitor. I sat perfectly still, facing the bridge. Emily, I can't find my way, I'm lost. I counted the sodium lights. 18 lights. Emily, why did you leave me? My hands were shaking. I gripped the desk. Emily, I'm so cold. I counted the lights again. 18. The voice stopped at 5:09 a.m. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. He took the logbook. You look tired. I'm fine. You've been here almost 3 months, longest anyone's lasted in 2 years. You should take a night off. I'm fine, I repeated. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I drove home. I slept badly. I dreamed about the bridge, about figures in the river, about my mother calling my name from darkness. On Friday, Jerry brought my 12th week's pay and a new document. Delta Bridge overnight procedures, extended shift protocols for operators working more than 60 shifts, 36. You may begin to experience familiarity with recurring events and entities. This is normal. Do not attempt to communicate with or acknowledge these entities. Continue following all protocols. 37. If you feel compelled to exit the booth outside of approved procedures, resist this impulse. Call Martin immediately if the compulsion is strong. 38. After 90 days of continuous employment, you are eligible for a 2-week paid break. This break is recommended but not required. 39. If you experience difficulty distinguishing between events that occur during your shift and memories from previous shifts, note this in the logbook and speak to Jerry or Martin. 40. You are performing a necessary service. The rules exist to protect you. Trust the rules even when they seem arbitrary. I read the document twice. Jerry waited. Have I been here too long? I asked. No. But you're approaching the threshold where it gets harder. Most people don't make it this far. What threshold? 3 months. After 3 months, the bridge knows you. Things get more personal. He looked at me seriously. You can stop any time. I'll give you 2 weeks severance, no questions. And if I keep going, then you keep following the rules. They'll keep you safe. I thought about my mother's voice, about the figures that appeared in the same places night after night, about the objects that materialized inside a locked booth. I'll keep going, I said. Jerry nodded. All right. But you take a night off each week now. That's not optional. You pick the night, but you take one. I agreed. I took Sunday nights off. On my 83rd shift, I broke a rule. It was an accident. At 1:57 a.m., facing the bridge as required, I heard footsteps behind me. They circled the booth once, twice. On the 3rd circuit, they stopped directly behind me. I started to turn, just a reflex, or just a quick glance before I remembered. Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., face the bridge. I stopped myself mid-turn, maybe 45 degrees off center. In my peripheral vision, I saw something, a shape, tall, dark, featureless. It was standing immediately behind me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched it. I snapped my eyes back to the bridge. My heart hammered. The shape didn't move. After 30 seconds, the footsteps resumed. They moved away from the booth toward the shed. I wrote in the logbook, 1:57 a.m. Accidentally turned toward footsteps. Corrected immediately. No incident. The rest of the shift was normal. But the next night, things changed. At 1:58 a.m., the footsteps circled the booth again. They stopped behind me. This time, I didn't turn. Something tapped on the glass directly behind my head. 3 slow taps. If you hear knocking on the booth glass after midnight, check the camera monitor first. I looked at the monitor. The camera showed the area behind the booth. Nothing was there. If you see nothing on the monitor, do not respond. Do not unlock the door. Do not look toward the knocking. I faced the bridge. The tapping came again, harder this time. 3 deliberate knocks. I kept facing the bridge. The tapping stopped. The footsteps moved away. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. I gave him the logbook. "You turned toward the footsteps last night," he said, reading. "It was a mistake. And tonight they knocked." "Yes." He looked at me. "Things escalate when you break a rule, even accidentally. They test you. You did right to ignore the knocking." "Has this happened to other people?" "Yes." "What happened to them?" "Most quit. A few kept working." He paused. "One didn't make it." "Didn't make it?" "She opened the door. We found her truck here at dawn, engine running, booth empty. Never found her." I felt cold. "When was this?" 4 years ago, before they added some of the rules." He closed the logbook. "You're careful, Emily. You follow protocols, you'll be fine." I drove home. I didn't feel fine. On my 87th shift at 3:18 a.m., I heard voices from the shed. But these voices were different. They were clear, distinct. "Help us, please. It's so cold, let us in. Emily, we know you can hear us." I faced the access road and didn't respond. The voices continued for 8 minutes. On my 90th shift, I hit 3 months of continuous employment. I took the next 2 weeks off. During those 2 weeks, I tried to return to normal life. I saw friends, I went to movies, I read books. But I couldn't stop thinking about the bridge, about the lights, the figures, the voices, about what was out there circling the booth every night. I called Jerry on the 12th day. "I'm coming back," I said. "You sure? You have 2 more days." "I'm sure." He was quiet for a moment. "All right. See you Sunday night." I returned on my 98th shift. Ron handed me the logbook. "Good to have you back." "Anything change while I was gone?" "Same as always. You know how it is." I locked the booth and settled in. The first night back felt different. Familiar but strange. Like returning to a house you'd moved out of. I knew exactly where everything was, exactly what would happen and when. At 1:37 a.m., a figure appeared on the bridge center span. I noted the time. It stood for 9 minutes and departed. At 2 a.m., I turned to face the access road. At 3 a.m., I counted 18 lights. At 3:43 a.m., I heard the footsteps circle the booth. They stopped behind me. 3 taps on the glass. I didn't look. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. "How was it?" he asked. "Normal." He smiled slightly. "Welcome home." I worked steadily through my 14th and 15th weeks. The patterns continued. Figures on the bridge, footsteps circling, voices from the shed. I followed every rule precisely. On my 110th shift at 2:47 a.m., a vehicle stopped at the booth during the no eye contact window. I processed the transaction without looking up. The driver didn't leave. The engine idled. After 15 seconds, they spoke. "I know you're not supposed to look at me." I kept my eyes on the keyboard. but I need to tell you something about this place. Do not respond to questions about other vehicles, other people, or anything you have seen during your shift." The driver didn't ask a question, but I stayed silent anyway. There used to be a town across this river. Before the flood in 1938, 300 people. The river took it all in one night. Every person, every building. I said nothing. They're still here, the ones who drowned, they're still here. The vehicle sat there for another 10 seconds. Then it drove on. I wrote in the logbook, 2:47 a.m. Driver made statement about local history. Did not respond. Vehicle proceeded. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. On my 115th shift, Friday of my 16th week. Jerry came with my pay. "You're at 115 shifts," he said. "That's a record for night shift. Previous record was 103. How long did that person last after 103? She worked one more shift and quit. Why? She didn't say." He handed me the envelope. "You think you can keep going?" I had $17,000 saved now. More than enough to stabilize my life, to move somewhere better, to have a cushion. But I didn't want to stop. "I can keep going," I said. Jerry nodded slowly. "All right, but I want you to take 2 nights off each week now. Your choice of nights, but 2 minimum." "Why?" "Because I don't want to lose you, and because the longer you're here, the more it costs you. I can see it in your eyes. You're somewhere else even when you're not here." He was right. I spent my days off thinking about the bridge, about the rules, about what would happen if I stopped coming. I agreed to 2 nights off per week. On my 123rd shift, I started preparing the notes. I didn't plan to leave, but I understood now that someday I would leave, or something would happen and someone else would need to know what I knew. I bought a small notebook and began writing during the quiet hours. I recorded patterns. The figure appeared most often between 1:30 and 2 a.m., always at the center span. The footsteps circled the booth 3 times before stopping. The voices from the shed always started around 3:15 a.m. The extra lights, when they appeared, were always clustered near the center span. I wrote about the near misses, the times I almost broke a rule. The time I almost looked at a driver during the no eye contact window. The time I almost answered the wrong name on the radio. The time I almost exited the booth when I heard my mother's voice. I wrote about the objects that had appeared. The key, an old photograph, found on shift 128, showed the old railway bridge. A rusted railroad spike, shift 132. I wrote about the people who went into the river. 17 in my time. Always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., always from the center span. State Patrol never found bodies. On my 141st shift at 4:59 a.m., I heard my mother's voice for the last time. "Emily, I forgive you." I hadn't known I needed to hear that. My hands started shaking. "Emily, you can let go now." I gripped the desk and counted the lights on the bridge. 18 lights. "Emily, I love you." I kept counting. 18 lights. The voice stopped. At 6 a.m., Ron arrived. He looked at me and frowned. "You're crying." I touched my face. It was wet. I hadn't noticed. "I'm all right," I said. "You sure?" "I'm sure." I drove home. I called my mother for the first time in 3 years. She answered on the 4th ring. "Emily?" "Hi, Mom." "Oh, honey, it's so good to hear your voice." We talked for an hour. She was fine, healthy, living in Portland, working at a library. We'd fought 3 years ago about something I couldn't even remember now. The distance between us had been my choice, my pride. "I love you, Mom," I said before we hung up. "I love you too, sweetheart." I slept better that night than I had in months. On my 149th shift, Jerry came to see me at 2 a.m. He'd never visited during a shift before. He knocked on the booth door. I checked the camera monitor, saw him clearly, and unlocked the door. Is something wrong? I asked. No, I just wanted to check on you. You've been here almost 7 months now. I'm doing fine. He looked around the booth, at the monitors, at my notebook on the desk. Writing things down? Notes, patterns, for whoever comes after me? He nodded. That's smart. Sarah did that too, left a whole binder of observations. Can I see it? I'll bring it next week. He paused. Emily, you know you can't do this forever. I know. But you're not ready to stop. No. Why not? I thought about how to answer. Because someone has to be here. Someone has to follow the rules, and I'm good at it. You are. He looked out at the bridge. But there's a cost. You see that, right? I see it. What will you do when you leave? I don't know yet. He nodded and left. I turned back to face the access road as required. At 3 a.m., I counted the lights. 18. I'm writing this during my 153rd shift. It's 4:32 a.m. The sky is beginning to lighten. In an hour and 28 minutes, Ron will arrive. I'll give him the logbook and this notebook. I'm leaving after this shift. Not because I broke a rule or because I'm afraid, because it's time. 7 months is long enough. I've saved $23,000. I've documented everything. I've proven to myself that I can do hard things, that I can face the strange and inexplicable and not break. But Jerry was right. There's a cost. I see things differently now. I hear patterns in random noise. I count lights compulsively. I check locks multiple times. I don't trust my own perceptions anymore. This job changes you. Slowly, steadily, night by night. The rules keep you safe from what's outside the booth, but they don't protect you from what happens inside your own head. Whoever reads this, whoever takes this shift next, the rules work. Follow them exactly. Don't improvise. Don't test them. Don't try to understand what's out there. Just follow the rules, collect your pay, and know when to leave. Some practical advice. The figure on the bridge appears most nights between 1:30 and 2 a.m. Note the time, watch for 10 minutes. If it moves toward the booth, turn off the lights and wait. It will leave. The footsteps circle the booth 3 times before stopping. They'll tap on the glass. Don't look. Don't respond. They'll leave after 30 seconds to 2 minutes. The voices from the shed sound distressed. Ignore them. They're not asking for help. They're testing you. If you hear someone calling your name after 4 a.m., it will sound like someone you know, someone you love or lost. Don't respond. Don't check the monitor. Count something, the lights, the transactions, your breaths. It will stop. The river sometimes sounds like voices between midnight and 4 a.m. It's not voices. Ignore it. Trust the rules. Trust Martin. Trust Jerry. They've kept dozens of people safe over the years and know when to leave. Don't stay too long. Don't let this place become more real than the rest of your life. It's 5:30 a.m. now. Time to unlock the door. At 5:45 a.m., I'll turn on all the exterior lights. At 6 a.m., Ron will arrive. I'll hand him this notebook and the logbook. I'll tell him I'm done. Then I'll drive away from the Delta Bridge for the last time. I'll drive east toward the sunrise, toward whatever comes next. I'll carry the rules with me. I'll never forget them, but I won't follow them anymore. I'll be free of the footsteps and the figures and the voices that sound like people I know. I'll be free. Whoever you are reading this, follow the rules, stay safe, and leave when it's time. The bridge will still be here. It's always been here. It's not going anywhere.